The house felt foreign, like it had been rearranged in my absence, both physically and emotionally. Every creak in the floorboards sent a chill up my spine. It started with a weird smell. I came home from a weekend trip with my sister and noticed at the moment I walked in. Not bad exactly, just familiar. Like my childhood home. Like my mom's perfume. I dropped my bags, called out for my husband, Dan, and headed to the kitchen. That's when I saw it, a pair of floral slippers by the pantry. The exact ones I got Mom for Christmas last year. My heart sank, but I still tried to laugh it off. Did Mom stop by or something? I texted Dan. No reply. The next clue came when I opened the fridge. It was packed with food I hadn't bought, Tupperware full of cabbage rolls, a weird tuna salad she always made, and her signature labeled containers, "Do not touch." That's when the dread turned into certainty. I headed upstairs. My bedroom door was half open, and I heard humming. Her humming. I pushed the door open, and there she was. My mother. Sitting at my vanity like it was her own. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Oh, good, you're back." Dan said I could stay here now. Isn't that wonderful? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. My husband hadn't mentioned anything, no call, no text, nothing. Just moved her in. And trust me, there's history. My mother and I? We're not close. She was controlling, manipulative, and the reason I moved across the country in the first place. I hadn't let her stay even one night in years. But Dan? He knew all of this. We had talked about it. He promised he understood. He promised he'd never let her back in. So why is she unpacking in my guest room? When I finally reached Dan, he was casual, almost smug. She needed a place to stay. You weren't here? I figured you'd be okay with it. I lost it. I asked him if he remembered the things she'd done to me. The years of gaslighting, the emotional blackmail, how she ruined my first engagement, how she tried to sabotage our wedding. And he just shrugged. You're overreacting. She's your mom. She's not that bad. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this some kind of sick joke? Then it got weirder. I started noticing my stuff missing: clothes, jewelry, makeup, all being borrowed by my mother. And when I confronted her, she said, "Well, you left me alone all those years. I deserve this." Dan defended her. Constantly. Even started sleeping in the guest room with her to make sure she felt safe. Safe. From me. Now she's redecorating. Calling herself Lady of the House. And Dan? He's pulling away more and more. I even caught him whispering with her when they thought I was asleep. I don't know what's going on, but something is very wrong. And I'm starting to wonder if this was all part of their plan. To isolate me. Replace me. Take over my life. And I have no idea how far they're willing to go. I barely slept that night. The house felt foreign, like it had been rearranged in my absence, both physically and emotionally. Every creak in the floorboards sent a chill up my spine. I kept listening for whispers through the walls, the low hum of their conversations. At 3 a.m., I finally got out of bed and did something I never thought I'd have to do in my own home. I locked my bedroom door. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a second, my brain flickered back to childhood mornings, before everything went dark between me and my mother. That smell used to mean comfort. Now, it meant control. I stepped into the kitchen and found them sitting together, laughing. Dan was wearing an apron. My mom had her hand on his arm. "Morning, sleepyhead," she chirped. Danny made breakfast. Danny. She used to call my abusive ex that exact nickname. And now she was using it for my husband. I sat down, silent, then slid a plate toward me without eye contact. "We were thinking," my mom said, "we should repaint the living room. It's so dull." I already picked out some swatches. I haven't agreed to anything," I said flatly. Dan finally looked up. "It's just paint. Don't be so dramatic." She smiled like she'd won something. I felt like I was slowly being erased. Later that afternoon, I went to our closet. A third of my clothes were missing, replaced with floral robes, orthopedic shoes, her favorite shawls. My shoes had been moved to the hallway. Like I was the guest now. I stormed downstairs and demanded answers. "Where are my clothes?" Mom didn't even blink. "I sent them to Goodwill. Most of it didn't suit you." "You what?" Dan walked in mid-shout. "Why are you raising your voice?" "Because she's throwing away my life." Dan looked between us and then calmly said, "You've always had issues with boundaries, babe. Maybe this is a good opportunity to work on that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I called my sister that night, desperate for backup. I didn't even get 2 sentences in before she said. She called me. "Mom, she told me you were having some kind of breakdown. She said Dan is just trying to help you transition. What the hell is going on? Transition to what? What narrative was she spinning? The next day, I came home early from work and found them in the office, my office. She was sitting at my desk. He was standing behind her. The computer was open. My email was logged in. When they noticed me, Dan jumped like he'd been caught. We were just checking in, he said quickly. You've been forgetting things. Excuse me. She was worried you might be. Losing touch a little, he added. You said you've been tired. Stressed. This is for your safety. My mother just nodded slowly, like she was watching something delicate unravel. And that's when I knew I wasn't being paranoid. They were gaslighting me. Together. And if I didn't act soon, I wasn't going to have a home or an identity left. That night, I cried in my car. Not because I was weak, but because I finally saw the truth. This wasn't just about my mom overstaying her welcome. This was about control, manipulation, erasure. I was being pushed out of my own life, inch by inch. I called a therapist the next day, told her everything. She didn't even hesitate. You're not crazy. What you're describing sounds like a coordinated gaslighting campaign. It was validating, but it was also terrifying, because it meant I had to stop playing defense. I had to start fighting back. First step? Information. I checked my laptop's access logs. My email had been opened dozens of times from Dan's IP address during hours I was at work. I checked our Nest cameras. Deleted footage. Files missing. When I confronted Dan, he brushed it off. Why are you being so paranoid? You need help. Classic move. Accuse me of instability when I start asking questions. Then came the final straw. I walked into the kitchen and found my wedding photo ripped in half. My face cut clean out. It was in the trash. I confronted both of them that night. Cornered them in the living room. Either she leaves or I do. Dan leaned forward on the couch, hands clasped like he was the one in pain. She's staying. For your sake. I looked at my mother. She smiled like a wolf. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. That word, sweetheart, burned coming out of her mouth. I packed a bag. I didn't even cry this time. I was too angry. Too clear. But before I left, I did something I knew they wouldn't expect. I left my phone on the kitchen table, screen unlocked, camera recording. They talked for 15 minutes after I walked out the front door. I got every word. Dan, she's spiraling faster than I thought. Mom, don't worry. She'll be back. They always come back when they have no one else. Dan, and if she doesn't? Mom, then we keep the house. She'll sign it over if we push the mental instability angle hard enough. I sent the footage to my sister, my lawyer, and my therapist. I wasn't spiraling. I was waking up. And this story? It's just getting started. The next morning, I did something they never saw coming. I called a real estate lawyer. I had already sent him the footage. I explained everything, how the house was in both our names, how Dan was trying to push me out, how my mother, my own mother, was helping him do it. He didn't even hesitate. You're being coerced. This isn't just toxic, it's strategic abuse. But if you play it smart, we can flip this. We started building the case quietly. Every message, every deleted camera clip, every time Dan accidentally logged into my email. It was all part of the timeline now. I didn't speak to either of them for a week. I moved in with my sister and let them stew in the silence. Then I filed a motion for temporary exclusive use of the property. I expected backlash. I didn't expect a restraining order against me. Dan claimed I was emotionally unstable and dangerous. He even dragged up a panic attack I'd had 2 years ago, twisted it into evidence. But here's the thing. He didn't know I'd already sent everything to my therapist, who was now ready to testify. Nor did he know I'd planted a backup camera in the hallway mirror before I left. The hearing was brutal. Dan cried on command. My mother pretended to be afraid of me. But then I played the clip. Them laughing. Mocking me. Plotting. The judge didn't even blink. Restraining order? Denied. Dan's face crumbled. Mom just stared straight ahead, like she was watching a slow car crash. But the best part? The judge ordered a temporary removal of all non-owners from the house, which meant my mother had 48 hours to leave. I didn't say a word to her when she walked past me in the courthouse parking lot. But she whispered, "You think you've won. You haven't. Maybe not yet. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again." And Dan? He still doesn't know what I have on him next. Because I just found something in our joint bank records. Something that changes everything. So, about that thing I found in our finances. I wasn't snooping. At least, not at first. After the hearing, I was just trying to get a handle on our joint accounts, see what was left after Dan had been using our money like it was his solo piggy bank. But then I noticed something strange. A series of recurring transfers. Small enough to fly under the radar. $150 here, $200 there. Every couple of weeks. Always to the same account. The name listed? L. Ashton. Not a name I recognized. Not a family member. Not a friend. But then I Googled it. Turns out, she's a divorce attorney. Not just any divorce attorney. One who specializes in preemptive spousal asset protection. My heart just stopped. He'd been planning this. All of it. The manipulation. The fake affection. Moving my mom in to push me out. The attempts to make me look unstable. The sudden accusations and the legal traps. This wasn't a man reacting out of emotion. This was a man executing a plan. A long, detailed plan to leave me with nothing. But here's the kicker. He forgot that L. Ashton is very well reviewed. So well reviewed, in fact, that she posts blog articles explaining the tactics her clients sometimes use to gain leverage before a divorce. Tactics like turning mutual friends into spies, fabricating emotional instability, slowly draining shared funds, using a close relative, like a parent, to isolate the other spouse. I read that list like it was a checklist of my life over the past 3 months. And suddenly, I realized, my mother didn't come up with this plan. Dan did. And he'd weaponized her, just like he'd weaponized everything else. He wasn't just trying to win a divorce. He was trying to erase me completely. But I'm not going down without a war. I've got my own attorney now. One who's already helped me file a forensic audit of our accounts. Every shady move Dan's made. It's about to be dragged into the light. And my mom? Let's just say she picked the wrong side. Because the next phase of this? It's not about survival anymore. It's about revenge. I didn't knock. I walked straight into the guest room, her room now, and she jumped like she'd seen a ghost. Good. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling on her phone like nothing in the world was falling apart. Can we talk? I asked. She didn't answer. Just set her phone down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me with that tight-lipped expression she always wore when she knew she was wrong, but refused to admit it. Why did you do it? I asked. Still nothing. I know about the bank transfers. I know Dan has been paying a divorce lawyer behind my back. I know about the manipulation, the lies, and the plan to leave me with nothing. So tell me, Mom, why did you help him? Her face twitched. And then she said it calmly, like she wasn't admitting to the most twisted betrayal a mother could inflict. He promised to take care of me. I just blinked. What? She finally looked at me. He said if I stayed here, supported his version of events, and kept you calm and cooperative, he'd pay off my debt. Help me move into a condo once things settled. I'd have stability. After everything your father put me through, I needed that. I deserve that. I took a step back. So, you sold me out. No, she said, sharply. I chose survival. You never understood what it's like to be dependent on someone who has no intention of protecting you. I thought, maybe Dan was different. I wanted to scream, cry, collapse. But I didn't. I just nodded. Thanks for being honest. And I left the room. It wasn't until I closed the door behind me that I realized. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a war zone, and my own mother had joined the enemy for a better bunker. But here's the thing about me, Dan, and my mother both underestimated. I know how to fight back quietly. And when I strike, it'll be surgical. Starting with the one thing Dan never thought I'd touch. His job. I waited until Dan left for work. Then I logged into the fake email account I created 3 months ago, back when the gut feeling first hit me that something was off. I didn't know what I'd use it for then. But now, I knew exactly what it was for. Dan's company prides itself on ethics, transparency, zero tolerance for misconduct. What would they think of a regional manager who was secretly funneling personal funds through a dummy LLC to cover bribes, hush money, and illicit consulting? What would they think of a man using company time and potentially company resources to coordinate a secret divorce campaign against his wife, all while parading around as a mentor for workplace wellness? Yeah, I had sinned. The email contained screenshots, dates, account info, and just enough breadcrumbs to warrant a serious internal investigation. I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to embellish. I just handed them the truth. A few hours later, Dan called me. His voice was tight, panicked, like he was trying to keep it together but couldn't stop the cracks. Did you do something? He asked. I played dumb. Like what? There's an issue at work. Compliance flagged something. I don't know what's going on yet, but it sounds serious, I said, keeping my tone ice cold. Hope you didn't do anything unethical. He was silent for a long time. Then he hung up. By 5 p.m., he was home, early. That never happened. He stormed through the door like a man who just watched his entire world wobble. And you know what? That was just the first domino. Because I hadn't even played my second card yet. You want war, Dan? You've got it. And this time, I'm not pulling any punches. Dan was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. He wasn't shouting yet, but I could see it brewing under his skin. That nervous tick in his jaw, the way his fingers curled and uncurled. I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, he finally snapped. But if you're trying to ruin me, you're playing a dangerous game. I just stared at him. Calm. Quiet. Because nothing unsettles a man like a woman who won't rise to his bait. Ruining you? I repeated. Dan, you ruined yourself. I just made sure the right people knew about it. He froze. And that's when I said it. Slow, deliberate, like twisting a knife. You thought you could move my own mother into this house, manipulate her, control me, gaslight everyone, and what? I'd bake you a damn pie. He tried to talk, but I cut him off. No, you don't get to speak. Not until you explain something. I walked over to the table, opened my laptop, and turned it to face him. A video was paused on the screen. The security footage I'd recovered from an old USB camera tucked in the garage. The one Dan didn't know existed. I hit play, and there it was. Dan, helping my mom into the house. Her suitcase in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other. He kissed her cheek, affectionate, like an old friend. She laughed, nodded. Then she handed him an envelope. It wasn't her idea. It never was. He planned this. All of it. Dan went pale. You set her up, I whispered. You played on her confusion. You lied to her. You made her think this was all out of love, that you were the one she could trust. He tried to spin it, of course. Claimed he was just helping her, that she'd been confused, that I was emotionally unavailable, and he did what he had to do. But the tape didn't lie, and neither did the documents I found in his desk drawer. Power of attorney drafts with my mom's shaky signature on them, dated before she even moved in. He was trying to take legal control over her finances, over her estate, over everything. And now, he knew I knew. He backed away from the table like the laptop might explode. This is out of context, he stammered. Save it, I said. The only thing out of context is how you ever convinced yourself I wouldn't find out. His face twisted. You think you're going to win this? No, I said, stepping closer. I know I am. Dan didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing downstairs, the occasional creak of the floorboards under his weight. Me? I barely blinked. I was too far past fear, too far past rage. Now I was just cold. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no text, just the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway and the sound of silence settling over the house. Good. I needed space. Not to mourn the end of my marriage, but to protect what really mattered. My mother. She sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly out the window, her tea untouched. I slid into the chair beside her and gently touched her hand. Mom, do you remember what Dan said when he brought you here? She blinked, slowly turned to look at me. He said you were tired, she murmured. That you needed help. That I could be with family again. I swallowed the lump in my throat. He had twisted the narrative so convincingly, even she believed it. Even now, I pulled out the documents, his forged power of attorney, the secret bank account he'd opened in her name, the real estate transfer paperwork he'd tried to sneak through. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He wasn't helping you. He was helping himself. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought he was being kind, she said, barely audible. I thought he was saving me from being alone. And in that moment, I hated him more than I ever thought possible. Not just for betraying me, but for using her loneliness, her fear, her fading memories. Later that afternoon, I went to the bank, then the lawyer, then the notary, and then I filed a restraining order. Not just for me, for her too. But just when I thought we might finally start reclaiming our lives, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. You think Dan was the only one? You really don't know what he's been into. Attached, a photo. Dan. In a car I didn't recognize. With a woman I'd never seen. In a briefcase. I clicked the photo, zoomed in, and my blood ran cold. The initials on the briefcase matched the forged power of attorney papers. This wasn't just manipulation. This was something bigger. And Dan wasn't working alone. The photo wouldn't stop burning into my brain. Dan, in a silver Lexus I'd never seen before, parked behind what looked like an abandoned building. Next to him, a woman with sunglasses, holding a briefcase identical to the one I'd seen in the forged documents. And both of them? Laughing. It didn't feel like business. It felt personal. I zoomed in on the license plate. Half obscured, but legible enough. By nightfall, I had a private investigator on the phone. I knew I was in deep now, deeper than I ever imagined, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about truth. About protecting my mother. About finally ending the grip Dan had on my life. 2 days later, I got a call back. The woman in the photo? Her name was Angela Whitmore. Financial advisor. No known relationship with Dan on paper, but she'd been investigated before twice for elder fraud. Charges never stuck. I felt sick. My mother had been her next mark. Through Dan. The PI went on. Angela had been spotted entering a storage facility just outside of town. One of the units was registered under a fake name, connected to a shell company Dan had created 3 years ago. It all fit. I drove out there. I didn't tell anyone, not the police, not my lawyer. Not yet. I had to see for myself. The facility was nearly empty. Just rows of silent, steel doors humming under flickering lights. I found the unit. I stared at it for a long time. My heart was pounding like it wanted out of my chest. I opened it. Inside were files. Boxes and boxes of them. Labeled with names I didn't recognize. Copies of IDs. Medical records. Even voice memos. It was a graveyard of stolen lives. Old people. Vulnerable people. People like my mother. And right in the center, taped to the inside wall, a flowchart. A network. Dan. Angela. 3 other names. And one name circled in red. Mine. That was the moment it truly hit me. I wasn't just uncovering Dan's secret life. I was part of it. A pawn in a scheme that had gone on for years. The door creaked behind me. Footsteps. I turned frozen in place. And there he was. Dan. Face like stone. Eyes hollow. I told you, he said quietly. You should have just let it go.